William Lawrence joins me now live. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on the program today. Now, there's a lot of, all right, just give us some insight into how this ban on coal from Russia is going to impact the EU and Russia itself.
Well, on the EU side, it causes pain, particularly in Germany. There are a number of countries that depend on Russian coal for part of its energy mix, which will force energy prices up and force them to switch to other sources of energy, including oil and gas, which may or may not be coming from Russia. Europe-wide, it's quite a complicated picture. Spain just made Algeria angry. So Algeria promised the Americans they would sell the Spanish gas, but at a higher price. Italy just turned to Libya. Each country is looking at energy prices, energy sources, and what they're going to do. But what's driving this, of course, is that Russia makes something like $1 billion a day from all of its energy sales, including coal. And so Europe is basically paying for the war on with one hand, while sanctioning the war on the other hand. And so if you're going to not wage a military war against Russia by sending in NATO troops, EU country troops, and American troops, and your war is going to be mostly, in terms of direct action, political or economic, then the economic pain has to be felt. And as long as Russia doesn't feel all the pain of those other sanctions, then that will prolong the war.
So what exactly is at stake here for the European Union? There's a lot of division among EU member states in imposing that crucial fifth round of sanctions.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, how much pain are they willing to inflict on themselves in order to inflict more pain on Russia? And that's a tough bargain. We've been reflecting here in the United States about how in '73, when there was the OPEC oil embargo, that was a foreign geopolitical situation and cartel forcing American energy prices up. But the American president and the American politicians in power took the brunt. That's partly what took down Jimmy Carter. So we have a French election coming up. We have other elections in Europe. We have right-wing parties on the rise, many of which are funded by Russia. And so the idea that you're going to put the democratic political forces at risk in order to inflict economic pain on yourself and Russia is part of what makes this so difficult in terms of the political calculus. But in the end, the worse the war gets, the worse the war crimes and crimes against humanity that are revealed as the Russian forces pull back from certain areas. I don't think Europe's really going to be left with a choice. They're going to have to start inflicting more direct economic pain on Russia.
Do you think that they acted too little too late? Do you think that if the West and the EU imposed these sanctions way earlier than when Russia first started to attack Ukraine, that it would have changed the course of the conflict?
Well, sanctions are always too little too late. And these are the most dramatic sanctions we've seen in Europe just about ever. So, could you have gotten to there faster? Of course you could have. Could have you stopped the war by inflicting, pre-inflicting sanctions, which is what the Ukrainians wanted? Probably not. I think the real sort of news here for everybody is the world order is changing. The European economic order is changing. Putin tried to tear it down, by invading Ukraine twice now in 2014 and 2020, with other European countries on his target list, including some of the Baltics, Georgia, Moldova, others. And so since we have to reorder our geopolitical and political and economic lives, we might as well start now and start biting the bullet now, to use a bad metaphor. But we're all going to have to suffer the economic consequences of the world Putin is trying to create.
Right. And Professor, as we know, the supply of weapons to Ukraine has been crucial in helping the military fight off Russian aggression. We're now seeing the U.S. Congress revive a program that dates back to World War II that allows the U.S. to send weapons to Ukraine more quickly and more efficiently. But do you think that this will make a big difference on the ground?
Well, it depends how many of which weapons, in what category and how quickly they get to the front lines. But as a general proposition, absolutely yes. Because even though this political and economic war that I've been talking about is important, ultimately, Putin only understands the language of force, even though that's not the language Europe wants to speak at the eastern parts of Europe. And since he only understands the language of force, you have to beat him on the battlefield first to bring him to the negotiating table. And so ultimately, in the end, they're going to have to inflict pain on the battlefield against the Russian forces. And as I've been arguing on TRT and elsewhere, they're going to have humanitarian aid corridors at some point, partial no-fly zones, something to protect Ukrainian civilians from the atrocious, devastating attacks on civilians that are going on, that are just epic and at World War II type levels. And so we're going to have to apply the principle, which we haven't applied enough at the UN, that was developed after Rwanda and wasn't used in Syria and was used in Libya, the responsibility to protect. We have to protect civilians being shot at deliberately en masse and killed by the thousands in wartime. And that means Europe's going to have to act militarily in Ukraine to protect them at some point.
All right, Professor William Lawrence, it was a pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you for that insight.